Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks, and as usual, I'm your host Carolyn, and today I'm joined by four special guests, and they are the writer Annalise Lockhart of the film, writer and director of the film Inheritance, which is, as we're filming now, currently screening at the Palm Springs Film Festival, and I'm joined by her cast, Victoria A. Miller, Ron Rice, and DeLelon Dallas, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the film. So Annalise, can you go first?
Yes, hi. Okay. I'm Annalise Lockhart. As you said, I'm writer, director of Inheritance. Yeah, my name has an E at the end, and it's been sort of like the love and bane of my existence, but has helped me be more outgoing. Yeah, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. And Victoria?
Hi, I'm Victoria A. Villier. Thanks for having me. This is so cool. I get to see all you guys' faces.
Yay. And Ron?
I'm Ron Brice. I play character Jeffrey. It's so good to see this cast. Wonderful cast after, well, 2 years almost.
Yeah.
Wow.
And DeLelon.
Hi, my name is DeLelon Dallas. I play the character of Tucker, or Tuck. And it's just wonderful to see everybody, man. It's been so long. My goodness. Yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to edit out my part because I realized I said I said Miller. That's the dyslexia talking. So it's Villier.
Yeah, it happens a lot. It's okay. I appreciate it.
Okay. So Annalise, so the E has would it have a the little dash at the end for if it's French? Is that what it is?
No, it would be helpful if it had an accent on it. No, it's it's sort of like a Northern European Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah.
So wait a second. All this time, we've been saying Annalise, and you've been letting us walk away with that?
I didn't think
Never
so.
corrected us.
Never. I'd have been like, Lisa, thank you.
Maybe you called me Annie. I feel like that's, I don't know.
Right.
I feel like you call me Annie, at least.
I do. Just
That's funny.
yeah.
So the film is a short film, and it's about this family that it lives in the forest of Vermont. Now, no, I like camping, but living, that's a whole different story. So they're living on this property, and they're surrounded by woods. And from what I gather, it's a very big part of the plot. I think the fact that they have the deed to the land, because the deed is the official government claim and legal claim saying this person or this family owns this property. This is theirs, free and clear. And it seems that also Tuck runs a farm, a maple milling farm, in the fact that he farms the maple from the trees around them. And I find this film is very interesting because it deals with a bit of supernatural science fiction, and then there's drama and history, because when it comes to these kind of films where you're talking about Black people owning land, especially owning land in America, there's a lot of context to this. So before we get into all of that, Annalisa, can you just say a little bit about the inspiration for this film and how you decided to integrate these different genres into this short film?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I think, well, first of all, the house where we filmed is actually my mother's cabin in Vermont. We didn't live there, but we spent a lot of summers there. I'm from Manhattan. Lived there my whole life, many generations going back. But yeah, I definitely was kind of inspired by some of the stories of friends I had in the area in Vermont, just where of course, the presence of Black people in that area is it can be low at times, or seem like it is. And then on top of that, just the the experience with us having that house there, kind of, even after many decades, somebody would move up the block and, have lived there for a couple of years and be like, well, they must be new. And it's like, no, like, you're new. We're not new. We've been here this whole time. And then, of course, like, home ownership is so important to me. I think, like, home ownership and legacy as something that I really saw worth fighting for, because I've also, it's unfortunately can be rare for Black families to be able to pass down property. And then as well, like, when you're writing something and you tell people about it, you like hear more and more stories that are related to it. Like Catherine, who is one of the ghosts, when she read the script, she was like, oh my gosh, I've actually heard stories about this happening, like people getting their deed to their house stolen or gone missing. Has happened a lot, like in New England as well. And I think that all of these things pair really well with horror and science fiction to me, because I sort of see horror as like, besides like my enjoyment of the genre, I think I see it as like this sort of setup of like, especially for a short film, like, oh my gosh, our heroes have this really tough set of circumstances, like how are they going to get out of it? And science fiction, I see as a genre full of solutions. So it's like, science fiction is like, oh, we have this like human-made technology that is going to help us get out of a bad set of situations. So I think that those genres can pair really well together.
And for the cast, what were your first thoughts when you got the script, and how did you go about auditioning for it? Because I find the characters, they're a family, but there's this underlying I called it not tension, but this unease amongst them, because there's a scene in particular when because they're celebrating Nora's birthday, and there's a moment where Tucker and Jeffrey look at each other, and I'm like, these two seem kind of shady. And like, I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I read the synopsis, but I'm still like, what are these two up to? I'm like, they know something. So for the three of you, when you read the script, like, what were your first impressions of the characters? Like, because like, I was like, I don't know if I trust them. Like, what are they keeping from her?
Yeah. When I first read the script, I remember thinking how brilliant Tucker is. Like the idea, because there's a scene that I have in the film where he uses the maple trees as a device to create this kind of invisible force field, from the ghost. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh wow, to be able to play a character that is this ingenious and like to use his environment around him to protect the family, right? But also knowing that, we see ghosts. Like that's, I was telling Annie when we first auditioned that, I really appreciated what she had done with this script, and also just like, it's like, this ability to see ghosts and know that we're haunted by this, and Victoria's character not really being aware of anything quite yet until she brings it to her brother and her father, about like what's going on, why are these things happening, who are these people that are haunting us, haunting our family,
I personally, I just love the unit right off the top. I love the whole family thing, and having the outside obstacle of this, has nothing to do with how connected the family is. It's just something that they basically overcome together. And when I read that, that's why I fell in love with the script right away. You know.
Yeah, I agree. It's like without one person, there wouldn't be like this full unit that once like Nora understands what's going on, it's a missing like puzzle piece. And I really liked near like the end when Tucker is showing Nora the McCoy field, and then kind of like immediately it's like, oh, okay, we are going to resolve this issue. We have a plan. Yeah, and like kind of there's like a montage of everyone kind of doing a little bit. And I was like, okay, this is really dope. Like they're really about like protecting their family and their own legacy by any means necessary. And I really like that. Yeah.
So the first thing I want to kind of like almost go in chronological order with the film, because I like how I like how everything plays out in a specific order, especially with the dialogue. There's certain parts of how the dialogue ties into everything that happens at the end. Like it starts out with they're celebrating Nora's birthday, and her father gives her the deed. And like for me, like I did paralegal study, so I know how important it is to have the actual copy in your hand, because like most people, they do celebrate and they make having the deed a big deal. And there's a moment where she has to blow the candle, and my first thought was like, girl, why you got this thing so close to this candle? And
nobody's ever said that. I like that.
Wow.
That was my first. I'm like, why are you holding this thing so close? I'm like, girl, what do you think? Bring it back.
It's foreshadowing.
Yes.
Spoiler. It's hard to remain spoiler free with a 14-minute film.
It's true. Yeah. How comfortable are you with like spoilers? Because like for me, I tend to like kind of go into spoilers because I like to discuss like the small details. But if you don't want to discuss like super spoilers, that's perfectly fine with me too.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Let's go all in. Okay.
I could talk about how I love spoilers for like the rest of the interview.
Right? I love spoilers because I always tell people like spoil it for me, because that doesn't change how I view it, because I don't have visual context. All you're telling me is what you see, and it doesn't change how I might interpret what you're telling me, right? So I like spoilers never bother me.
Very true. Yeah.
So like we like starting from like the deed, and for the birthday. So we don't know how old Nora is, but I'm getting the sense that when they see the ghost, it's connected to their birthdays. Like it's almost like I thought of it almost like a generational curse. So where like as each generation reaches a certain age and they celebrate their birthday, this is when the ghosts appear to them. Like the ghosts are always there, but this is when they actually see them. So am I reading that right? Is that what it is?
Definitely. And I think that just that horror kind of reflects life. I think that I just wanted to shine a light on how families try to like shield each other from this generational trauma and protect their younger daughter, younger sister, family members. But unfortunately, sometimes sharing is better, and giving somebody a warning is better. But I think that, I imagine you're always kind of just hoping that if I don't tell them, like maybe it just won't happen. And at least in my family, I've definitely experienced that.
Yeah, I always thought that's the reason we hadn't told her, was the hope that it wouldn't happen.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that was the whole character thing, that, I know it happened with Tuck, but I'm still hoping that maybe it won't happen with the girl. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But don't you think it was, even if she had never seen them, don't you think it's still kind of unfair that she never knew that her brother and her father had this experience, especially one that's tied so closely to the land that they live on? Because like, even if I can't see ghosts, I'm like, if you're telling me there was a ghost walking around, like I need to know. Like, I mean, the Caribbean, we don't play with those. We don't play with that. No, we don't. Black people, we don't play that kind of way. And like, my mom would be like, I can't see it, but I'm going to get some olive oil and put a cross on the door and start saying prayers. Like, don't you guys think it's unfair to not give her that knowledge, that important part of who they are as people? Because that's an experience that she doesn't know that they're having around her.
I mean,
Yeah.
in my family, we never, it's like not my whole childhood. Nobody ever talked about seeing ghosts. And then I wrote this movie, and then like when people were like, I've seen a ghost. I've seen a ghost. I was like, what? Where's the sharing? Sorry, really on your.
No.
I was just gonna say that, you know, I think I think Tucker and Pops was really just trying to protect Nora, you know, from having to ever really just protect her from these ghosts, but also that, you know, this information that, you know, our family has, you know, I won't call it a curse, but, you know, just we see ghosts, and until she says something, you know, hopefully we're just hoping that she doesn't see them too, you know. Yeah.
And
because they're not just ghosts either.
I was gonna say, I'm like, is it because they were white ghosts? Because
they're ghosts that are angry about something that has nothing to do with us, for one thing.
Right.
You know,
right.
So obviously they're really upset about something. And I mean, we kind of know, but we didn't do anything about that to make that happen. Right. So, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and for Victoria, I found Nora's reaction to me. She was kind of like, she accepted it pretty quick. Like, she didn't freak out at all. She was just like, yeah. So there's like these strange people hanging out in the woods. I'm like, she seemed pretty calm, cool, and collected. If it was me, I'd be like, you know what, Lord Jesus, you know.
I mean, that's true. Yeah. You know, it's like, what do you expect in like the woods? You know, some weird stuff's gonna happen. She's probably seen some other odd things where she's kind of like, hey guys, has anyone else noticed? And they seem pretty cool about it too. So I think it was like an acting exercise where it was like, you know, or how I took it as was like an acting exercise. Like, if I'm calm and cool and collective and they're calm about it, like, then maybe it's just like a person who's like picking up, you know, I don't know, wood too. I don't know, because I'm like, I don't know. It's just, that's a good point. That's a good point though. Yeah. I guess she's seen some weird stuff in the woods, and she's like, anyone else peep that? No? Okay, I'm gonna go about my business, you know?
Right.
There was an earlier draft where she sort of sees them and says, like, are you looking for the trail? Like, the trailhead's over there, which was sort of a legacy, or kind of like an orphaned line, because there is, the Appalachian Trail goes through there. So it is common to see like kind of worse for wear hikers, like kind of occasionally. But the way it sounded, I was like, that's like too much. I think, like, again, I kind of like simpler is better. So eventually I was sort of like, you should just see them be disconcerted and leave instead of like try to engage in a longer conversation.
That's something I wouldn't do. If I saw people, I would not, truthfully, I would not engage. I'm not much of a talker. When I see strangers, I'm like, hey, yeah, that way, and then like run opposite way.
Yeah, you say words for rim. Like, was that before you decided on what the ghost would look like? Because they don't look like travelers that are just like that have lost their way. Like they have like, you know, like an aura around them. So like, was that before you decided what they would look like visually for the camera?
They're so far away from her in that scene. So I think it's like, and I think it's, the idea is like, and I feel like this is a horror trope as well. Like, before I accept that this is supernatural, let me just like scan through the most obvious kind of explanation for this really weird thing that's happening.
Yeah.
It's a really short movie if you go, ghost!
We gotta go.
And the like, I loved what you said, Ron, about how they, what they're doing has nothing, or what they're upset about has nothing to do with the family. I think that that's like it's maybe antagonized or like aggravated by the family, but yeah, the ghosts are supposed to be, the idea behind them was that they basically like came out of the ground, so they have like dirt and twigs and leaves. But then the other piece is that like so much of their power is just by the fact that they like stare. And that I imagined that for Tucker and Jeffrey, they weren't like crossing the threshold. They weren't necessarily going into the house. So it was very inconvenient, but they weren't like threatening them so directly. But yeah, the stare was really important to me. Just like the power of being watched constantly. And that's why it's really obvious in one particular shot after Tucker is explaining his contraction in the McCoy field to Nora, and then we see that this man has been watching them talk. I wanted his face to look like a funhouse mirror, just to also reference back that their stares are so much a part of what gives him power. So you can kind of see that his face is kind of melting and moving a little bit.
Yeah, and
their eyes are red, and so it all kind of links into that.
No, it does, because like one thing, like what Tucker says is, he tells Nora that, well, when he asks her how does they make her feel, and she says they make her feel off. And that kind of, I related to that a lot, because like we're talking about a Black family existing in a space where white spirits are like just there looking at them. And like, I'm from the Caribbean, and I've been living in Canada now, this is 11 years, but like when we travel to certain parts outside of the GTA, when we head up into like the boonies, like the country, like Muskoka, and going like further north, and even in like we traveled through Quebec and gone camping in like the heart, or like the forest of Quebec. Like when we get those small towns, like people will legit stop it. I thought these things were just things I saw in movies, and then I experienced it for myself, where people like dead stop whatever they're doing and look at us as we're driving past, or if we get out to go to the convenience store. And that scene kind of reminds me of that, where they like white people will like look at us like we're anomalies, like we are weird and we're not of this land, and they're like, who are why are these Black people like traipsing across our land? And that scene kind of like mimics that. And it doesn't only happen in the country, it happens in the city. If we go into spaces where people think that we don't belong, and it could be like an office building, could be a mall. I've had people stare at me in a mall, like there's other Black people walking around, but you know what I mean. And that kind of like mirror that scene where like we're made to feel uncomfortable in spaces that we shouldn't feel uncomfortable in.
Yeah.
And for me, with these, when I watch these kind of films, especially when we talk about like, you know, like there's been a discussion recently about Black horror. Like there's so much Black horror and so much Black trauma, but like these kind of films I think are important because they like, trauma isn't only just physical trauma. It's not about violence. It could be just being made to feel like you don't belong. It could be made to feel like you're not worthy of occupying the space that you're in, or of owning land. And that's something that Black people have been contending with from the moment like our ancestors were brought across the Atlantic. And this film, I think, because you're talking about Vermont, like Vermont is upstate New York, yeah?
No, Vermont's its own state.
Is its own?
It's part of New England, part of the
New England. Yes. And I know my geography people. Ignore that one. But yes.
People in Vermont are generally pretty nice, so they'd be like, yeah, it's understandable that you'd think that. Like, they wouldn't be super offended.
Maybe I'm thinking, is it Rhode Island I'm thinking of that? Is it Vermont like above New York?
Yes, right?
Yeah, it's the side, kind of.
Okay.
So yes.
Yeah, they're like
here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Side by
right. The
side.
part over the little hook. Okay, yeah. So I know what I'm talking about, kind of, sorta. And so for the three of you for playing this scene, could you talk? I want to talk about the directing for these particular scenes because there's no dialogue. It's just the actors looking at each other. So for Annalisa, can you tell me about directing the scenes, and then for the three of you playing these scenes in particular because Nora's experiences with the ghosts are, from what we see, are different to the experiences that Jeffrey has in the fact that we don't see. I noticed that we don't see Tucker experiencing them, but we see Nora and Jeffrey interacting with them. For Nora is like she just like as we said, she's just kind of like okay, but then Jeffrey, there's a scene later where he just gets fed up and he's like he starts to lose his patience and he's just like I've been tolerating you for all this time and this is the one thing that I'm not going to tolerate you doing. So can you just tell me a bit about directing those scenes and then for you guys playing those scenes?
Which scenes?
Particularly the ones where they're just watching each other because there's no dialogue. It's just like the actors playing the ghost, looking at them, and then for Nora, Jeffrey, and Tucker just like watching them, and they're like looking at each other.
Yeah, I talk about direct, and I'm curious what you all think. Yeah, I think that for me, honestly, some of the best performances are actually in these scenes where there isn't any dialogue. So much, and that's like the power of film, right? Like so much is expressed through these glances back and forth. And, you know, I think for the ghosts, for Catherine and Bob, they really took it very, very seriously. They really committed to that. They were like, I am this person. I am just gonna. I think I kind of needed to, at times, kind of rein it in a little bit, tone it down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the scene where Nora is in that woodshed and sees the woman around the corner. And that's actually a reference to one of my favorite movies, Mulholland Drive, where there is a man behind the Winkies. Mm. And it's like one of my favorite scenes of all time. So I sort of knew that I wanted her to feel like there was something back there. And I mean, I think that was like one of the more fun things we were able to shoot because I was like, I think what I said to you, Victoria, was I was like, well, first I asked you, can you just, we weren't even shooting. I was like, can you just react as if you saw like the worst, scariest thing ever just to see what it was? And then I was like, okay. And then take that down like 5%, which is amazing. And then you really talked about like what you would be feeling, like this in my stomach, like I'm gonna throw up, all of these other things. And then really just that whole scene is just works because she's like motivated by a feeling to investigate what's back there, which happens in horror, but I think that it's more like, you know, they hear some rustling in the closet. I mean, it's very much like, don't go towards the sound. Yeah. But,
exactly. I'm like, girl.
Yeah, that's what my friends and family also said. They were like, why are you going in there? Turn around. And I'm like, no, I need to know. But yeah, I think, sorry, Annalise, were you still talking?
No.
Okay. I also agree with that scene. I think like, in the short, there's like levels of Nora, I guess, accepting what is happening to her family and specifically her, where like that scene in particular where she hears the sound, they are so close to like the family household, like proximity from where in the first scene they were like across, where they're like in the shed. And I think that's really terrifying because they are so physically close, even though they don't want anything. She doesn't know that. And yeah, so like that scene was probably one of my favorites, was that, and like the McCoy field. Yeah, where it's like Catherine wasn't there, and like I had to react to something that wasn't there, which was like kind of trippy, which is, it is acting, but it was like my first time like doing that for real. And I was just so in my head, and I was like, you know what, just, we had conversations, and yeah, I think it's like the wanting to investigate, and then the fear, and like not really knowing what they want. Because I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think like she's aware of like them wanting the deed yet, like them wanting the house. And so there's elements where they are really like close to her physical realm, where it's frightening. And yeah, I think it was that scene in particular was like really really interesting and really scary to envision what my worst fear would be. Yeah.
Mm. And
Yeah. The reason, and just to fill people in, the reason that Catherine wasn't there is obviously like you're following the camera, and the camera wraps around to where the Catherine is supposed to be. So you're kind of like emoting at a man holding a Steadicam.
Yes.
Yes, and for Ron playing the scene, this is the one close to the end, but just like kind of like you like Annalise, so you said that Nora kind of like moves through like her reactions to the ghost, but I find like Jeffrey's reaction was actually the opposite, where he starts out calm, and this is accepting, but then it reaches to the point where he's not accepting it anymore. So he's kind of like the flip side of Nora's journey through the film. So Ron, can you just tell me a bit about playing this facet of Jeffrey, because he seems like the kind of person that it takes a lot for him to lose his temper, but when he does, he's like that. He just goes full on.
Yeah, well, that's like me. I kind of early on, after reading the script, I mean, just going with what's on paper, he's had this place since 1983. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I consciously made the decision that they stayed further away and did nothing, and we just saw them in the distance for all that time. I think the deed being passed was some kind of trigger for the ghost, because if they had set fire to stuff before, there would have been a bigger conversation about this, and yeah, we would not have been that calm in the beginning. Mm-hmm. But yeah, all of a sudden things are getting burnt, and they're really attacking my little girl. Yeah, that makes any parent snap right there. Mm. You know, so
yeah, because it's not only that they're attacking her, but they're attacking her birthright, because this is what given to her. So.
Exactly. I mean, he says it right at the beginning. It took me a long time to own something, and I don't want y'all to have to spend that time to own something. Mm-hmm. You know. Mm-hmm. So.
And now I want to talk about the McCoy field. I was looking online to see if there is an actual thing, but I'm wondering if this is a reference to Star Trek. And
wow. Think of that.
It's not.
Wow.
What in Star Trek is that?
Dr. McCoy.
Dr. McCoy in Star Trek. And then because the McCoy field was making me think of the transporter beams, and I was legit looking up, I legit googled McCoy field, McCoy invisible field. Is this a real thing? So tell me about this. I want both Annalise and DeLelon to talk about this, because like DeLelon, you mentioned in the beginning, like he's going into physics now. There's like theoretical physics with invisibility and force fields and that kind of stuff. So Annalise, can you just tell me about this part of the script and this story and where this came from, and where are your references? Because if I can't find it, I'm gonna say it's related to McCoy and Star Trek.
I love this. I really hope Star Trek fans don't like come to me. So, and I just really have to hand it to DeLelon, like, in casting, I was just like so looking for, I think this was the scene for the auditions. Yeah. I just really was looking for somebody who could talk about science that doesn't exist in a way that was like interesting and where you didn't like fall asleep. And I really just like believed your excitement and passion about this science. Yeah. And that is like so me. There's so many parts of me and my brothers like in this character, and just wanted to like keep going. Like I'd love to have Tucker have his own like, you know, movie or something. But the McCoy field. So I actually workshopped this scene with my brother, who is he's a climate scientist. But we talked a lot about trees, and like I said, like he says in the film, trees do produce electricity and they're super powerful. And trees have, you know, so many great properties. Like there's a network underneath the soil where trees will like know if a tree in their family, like in their species, needs nutrients, and they will like send nutrients to that tree. So they're just very smart and very aware of the environment. So I definitely imagined that Tucker's aware of all of this, but I think that I loved the idea that like the trees, and this is very spiritual, but that the trees like knew that the family was supposed to be there and has a hand in protecting them. But I'm like writing the scene, and it went through, I think, the most iterations. I think this was the scene where we had the most different drafts up until like the day before we shot it. So additional kudos to you, DeLelon, for like changing the dialogue, changing all the time. But I sort of realized that the more I was explaining this science that doesn't exist, because I, you know, had some theories around it. I was like, yeah, if you had like electricity in a force field, you could like warp what you're seeing. It could like, and that's sort of how certain invisibility technologies work. Like it's, you know, reflecting and showing you what's behind the object, but it's kind of like more cloaking. It's not truly invisible. But the McCoy field, I came up with that as sort of a black box, the idea that like, it's meant to be a signal to the audience, like, oh, this is something that they know about and accept as real, but I'm not necessarily going to know how it works. So it's intentionally supposed to be mystery. And the name comes from Elijah McCoy.
Elijah McCoy, yeah, it was good. I was wondering that.
Yeah, because, you know, he's this Black inventor and engineer who kind of like revolutionized railroads, made lots of other inventions, and like in the sort of lore in my head, I just loved the idea that he had like this legacy of inventions that was sort of underground that Tucker like knows about and is using, like, and he's been trying to do this for a long time. Yeah, so, you know, he's just the next generation of these inventors and tinkerers. And there are lots of little like little references to other things like that. Like the deed has a seal that the art director made that has Oscar Michaud on it and a couple other names like hidden on the deed. Really amazing. DeLelon,
Wow.
No. And you know, when me and Annie were having that conversation, and when we were shooting that scene, I remember thinking that when she was explaining, because I'm pretty sure prior to shooting, she had told me about Elijah McCoy, and I was like, Elijah McCoy, I gotta look this individual up, and I kind of used that. I used that information, and using that, I mean, on set we had we had a lot of those blue wires, right, wrapped around the trees. I was like, okay, Tucker's building something here, right? And it's just and it's such palpable images that were coming to my head, and I just really just embodying that and using that to my advantage, because there was And I really love what you were saying, Annie. There was something spiritual about all these trees, you know, that were going to offer this protection, and, you know, Tucker having this knowledge and the solution to protecting the family, you know, I think was so beautiful. And yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes, man.
No, you sold it, because I was looking up to see if this is a real thing. But yeah, in my research, I did find Elijah J. McCoy, because I think it's really neat that this invention that you created for that is something to me seems pretty plausible, actually, because I remember years ago when I was doing biology, I learned like the largest living organism on Earth is actually a stand of trees. Like they're all interconnected on the ground, and they do transfer like nutrients to each other. It's like, I can't remember, it's in the States, but it's like this massive like forest, and researchers discovered that they're all actually, it's like literally one organism, but with just like hundreds and hundreds of trees connected together.
I just listened to a podcast on what is it? It's like Terry Gross, where there was an episode where they're talking about the secret lives of trees, and they also talked about this. I'm forgetting the name, but like how they communicate to each other, and like there's like this like kind of low key like an organism like force field between all of them, which I think that's really interesting how they all kind of align. But not to cut you off. Yeah, and it's cool. And like I don't know if you guys know, there was this book called The Triffids. So they kind of did a film adaptation. It's the one with Mark Wahlberg, or it's the one where the trees and the plants and everything come alive, and like it's
Triffids.
Yeah, it's a Triffids, and like it's like a trilogy series. And we read this years ago in primary school, but that book always stuck with me, because the trees do come alive and they release spores, and it's like this, they attack humanity because humanity is like, you're all tripping. So the trees, were like, yeah, we need to protect ourselves, and they just release spores. And so I kind of like I found like a lot of connections to like sci-fi and like horror. And then it's the one with Tessa Thompson where people turn into trees with this really scary bear.
Alien, yeah.
Yes, like. And I was thinking of that. I was thinking like how trees and how there's so much more power in nature than we actually think about. And with regards to the force field, it
was definitely a big visual reference at points for the film.
Yeah, I just like the whole idea of them being able to disappear, and it kind of struck me how at the end they do, and where in that they become ghosts on their own property. So this is one of those scenes that sometimes I tend to read, like I go like really deep into stuff, and I just like my thinking just goes like all out. So I the way I saw that scene was like they're now invisible to the ghosts. So like the ghosts now are on shore. The ghosts don't have any power over them, because they're like, well, you guys want to torment us and want to be like invisible to everyone else, and and only us can see you. How about you don't be able to see us, period. And like it's kind of like haunting, where at the end we're hearing them laughing and they're talking, and you just see like the wisp of the tea, the steam from the tea and these things, and like the ghosts are like, they just wander away because they don't have any more power over them. So could you just tell me about that scene and that like you're referencing for that? Because like for me, I just thought that was really powerful, where that was a way for them to reclaim their own power on this land. But it's also still kind of sad because they can't exist visibly. They can't exist visibly as a family. They can't exist visibly as Black people on their own property. They had to turn invisible just to be able to live there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was actually pretty hard for me in the editing process as well, because it's there's not much dialogue, like kind of explaining, narrating, like, okay, now we're going to be invisible, but that means that like they can't see us, but we can see each other. Like none of that happens. But you know, we did shoot a scene, like an epilogue scene, where they're sort of happy and talking and laughing, but it didn't really make sense. I was like, I think that once they disappear, it's also that the audience can't see them either. And it felt a little bit weird to go back into looking at them. But back to your question, I think that it's really tough because I think that on the one hand, you know, it could be seen as being like complacent. They're doing so much work to, they're needing to do so much work to kind of like appease, like appeasement is the way to escape these ghosts. But in the end, I think of it as like one very effective mode of survival. And I talk about the survival all the time because I think it's interesting and really like crucial to discuss like the ways that there are many different ways to, you know, escape oppression of all kinds. And especially with this family, you know, I was like, who are we to critique this avenue they do have to find peace? And, you know, in my heart, like, I believe that once they've done this, they can create, Tucker's making more things, Nora's chopping more wood. No, I'm just kidding. She's doing her, you know, expanding her maple business, like all of that can happen, but that can't happen until they feel safe and have this, like, the easing of the tension. And, you know, it's a complicated ending, but I think that, and also to me, I sort of like could see that as the way it would go down. They're not leaving.
Yeah.
They're not leaving.
I think the key word there is peace.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you got to do to have peace. I mean,
Yeah.
We're not going to fight. We're not here to, you know, try to drive you away or anything like that. We just want peace, you know.
Yeah. So like for as actors, like you guys are there, you're performing this role, you read the script, you go through the whole production, but like as audience, like what were your thoughts when you first watched the film? And just take yourselves out as the performers, just be going like, I'm the audience and I'm watching this. Like what were your initial thoughts about the film, and especially that ending? Because I just like that ending to me is like really deep. But for the three of you, like what were your thoughts watching it?
Victoria?
I was so blown away by the magic of it. I haven't done a piece where you know we use like CGI and because we spent so much time with the McCoy field and like making sure we got just I remember shooting especially that last scene, just like getting under that blue line just enough to make, you know, us disappear, and it was amazing, you know. And so that was me, you know, being blown away by the magic of the thing. But yeah, and I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
Just like as audience, just like about how everything just comes together, how it plays out at the end, especially with how the story for these characters, and because the way I saw it is that in a way they turned the tables on the ghosts themselves, because they're not ghosts to the ghosts. Like all the ghosts can just hear them, but they can't see them. So I thought it was actually kind of profound. It's sad, but also still kind of profound that they got to be able to flip the tables that way.
Yeah, it is sad because it was like you were saying earlier of just like how, you know, especially with these ghosts being white as well, right? Is how I mean, I'm drawing parallels here, just how white people can make you feel uncomfortable in your own space. And so I thought there were a lot of powerful images that we were getting, that I was getting watching the film, in order, and I was just like, oh man, wow, this is incredible, and it's so deep, you know, because ownership is a huge thing, survival is a huge thing with this film, and so many different elements. And so I was really just blown away just just the huge conversations that we're having today, right now, and just how so many of those conversations were just this 14-minute short, is just all in there. So
Yeah. And Ron and Victoria?
I think it's a very timely piece. I think it's like watching it for the first time, I was blown away by like all of the elements of like, this is what makes a film, because we were there, we shot it, but like it's the sound design and just kind of the lighting and the VFX and kind of, it was just like a very smart piece. And I am like, I watched it with some friends and they asked me, they were like, was it on purpose to make the ghost white? And I was like, yes. And then it kind of went into like this discussion of like, property and as Annalise said, legacy, and kind of like the land and what is under the land, and kind of unearthing all of these feelings about, family individualism, but also like collectivism. And so, watching it for the first time, I was truly blown away about like the cast and the crew. I was like, oh, we did this in like a couple of days, and like it was so much fun, and kind of, it was hard to watch it and not think of like memories of like, oh, I remember, like, not like watching with friends being like, yeah, so that day, like I fell, and or like, yeah, so my mom, like my dad and my brother, they didn't have to be on, they had like a half day, like wanting to fill them in on like the set work environment. But I thought about like the draft where the first page, which it got, I think you guys made like drafts about it, but it was like a quote from The Invisible Man. And I kept thinking about that, and just kind of, I'm like, this family is smart. Of course they're gonna, of course they're gonna outsmart these, really odd, peculiar ghosts, Black people are the moment. And I was rooting for them. I was rooting for us. FUBU.
Yeah.
For the young ones who don't know, that's for us by us.
Word. Yeah. But also, I just wanted to say how like it's like a psychological thriller, and like the traumatic effects that it has on the psyche, rather than like the blood and the gore, and that like there isn't violence that is projected on screen. And I think there's like a really smart way to have these discussions of lineage and the importance of family without having it to be so violent, and like an emphasis on the violence. And to go from the question you asked earlier, that's what really attracted me to the film, was that there wasn't like, if a Black woman wrote this, is directing it. I've never been on a film project where it was a Black woman directing and writing, and that it wasn't.
My first also.
It was
in it forever.
And like it wasn't a film that was just like being drenched in violence and gore, and I find that to be important in cinema. That's something, in all arts, that's something that we have to kind of branch out of. There's a newer, refreshing way to have these dialogues where it doesn't have to be an emphasis on like brutality. So
I was personally very pleased with the whole pacing and breadth of the thing. I mean, when I saw it was 14 minutes, I was in a panic. I thought, oh my God, we didn't get all that stuff in 14 minutes. No way. But to sit back and watch it and just, be an audience member for the first time, I was like really pleased with how smooth and polished it felt. I was very happy about that.
Yeah, I want to get a bit into the technical aspect of it a little bit, but going to something that both Victoria and DeLelon said, when you say something like this is timely, I have to like completely agree, because it kind of always fascinates me how when films like this always usually come out almost in clumps, and they're always like just come out, and they're all usually dealing with certain aspects of like history from different angles, but then it all just like, if you look at them, if you spread them out, they all kind of relate in the same way, and it's almost like serendipitous, because they made, but as you're talking, I thought of like the docu-series by Don Porter that's going to be coming out for National Geographic called Rise Again. It's about the Tulsa massacres. And then, but what she talks about the massacres, but then she also talks about the ownership, about how Black people were attacked because of ownership, and like, white people didn't want them to own their land. White people didn't want it to be prosperous. So it kind of like made me think of that. And then you have this coming out, and then I'm thinking of Underground Railroad, Barry Jenkins' show, and like, yes, he's talking about slavery, but he's talking about the right to exist as Black people on the land. And then like recently, just this week, I watched High on the Hog, and we did a round table with the host, with the documentarian, and the executive crew for the African American Film Critics Association. That roundtable we recorded a couple of days ago, and that to me kind of talks about the ownership of Black culture and ownership of food, and how we were able to like hold on to like our culture through slavery and all through everything that came after the reindustrial. What was the word I'm looking for again? The Industrial Revolution, and all of these things, we were able to hold on to our culture through food. And that your film is talking about holding on to birthrights, and it always fascinates me when I watch things and they all just serendipitously relate to each other. So I would say these kind of films are very timely, and they are always necessary, despite what people say talking about Black trauma. I'm like, listen, unfortunately, that is our heritage, but it all doesn't have to be blood, guts, and gore. You're talking about the psychological trauma. You're talking about also being able to show and prove that Black people can take back their power. Black people can do whatever. Like talking about Tulsa, Black people still were able to prosper afterwards, but they just also have to be able to process the grief that comes with what happened before. And like we always say, like, you can't understand your present and your future without understanding your past. And unfortunately, a lot of our past is painful, but that doesn't make us any less for acknowledging it. I think it makes us more, because it shows us how resilient we are as a people. It shows us like through all the things we go through, we're still able to pick up and create. We're creators, and we're actors. You guys are actors, and Elisa, you're writing and directing, and you're showing your own history and your own heritage through this film. Because like you said, earlier you mentioned your family owned the same house that you're filming in. So I think that's like really, I think that's almost like magical that you're able to film this story in something that you yourself have like a personal connection to. And so it's like, I don't listen to the naysayers.
It's all around.
Yeah. And so now going to the technical aspect, how did you do it? So like coming up with the concept of how the ghost would look, and then how the force field itself would look, because you do have to like have these discussions with your cinematographer and then with VFX crew. So just tell me a little bit about creating that part of the film.
Yeah. So the cinematographer is Charlotte Hornsby, who is incredible and just phenomenal. And we just wrapped up a movie, Master, that will be coming out on Amazon later this year, that she shot, starring Regina Hall. It's also it's horror and it's heavy, but I was the first AD on that. Anyway, Charlotte, amazing. And working with her is so great because she just really like immersed herself in the script. We were able to, really great that, it's our house. So we were able to go there many times, and, she like photographed the house, or like the settings, the places where we were going to shoot. We photographed it at like every time of day pretty much, because we were like staying there. And then we were able to be like, oh, like this room looks best at this time of day. Kind of like really schedule it out for hitting these scenes at like ideal lighting time. And then, yeah, I think of the look of the film. As you can probably tell, I'm just like a student of science fiction. I love it. I majored in English and creative writing, but my thesis was on Afro-Futurism. I'm like very deep fan. So I think that I kind of wanted it to look like, I had a really specific idea in my head, and I wanted it to look like this sort of like magical, mysterious And green is one of those colors that looks really, and I wish there was like a cinematographer here that could explain why this happens, but green is something that looks very strange on film. We didn't shoot on film, but we did at a film grade later during the color process. But I really, obviously the trees are a huge part of the film, so I really wanted green to be like throughout it. And I think that my memories of going to Vermont as a kid, I just remember the green being like so striking to my eyes, like coming from the city where we do have trees, obviously, but not that many trees. And then with the tubing, and the special effects side of things, I love movies that use practical effects as much as possible. So the tubing is like our art director, Cooper Campbell, actually like individually threaded. I think we ended up using EL wire, but I can't remember, through all of these tubes, and this maple farm up the road like gave us a ton. So really painstaking process, but it ended up being kind of this like big sculpture that he created with all of these. So the tubing like has no special effects added to it. It just looks like blue and glowing naturally. Like we didn't even add anything color correct. Like it just looks like that, which is amazing. But yeah, I think and then like, I think it was like low budget. I think that we shot it with the idea that we maybe wouldn't have like any money for visual effects, or like very little, just, thankfully for the invisibility, like we sort of did the classic, like, shooting a plate, like DeLelon mentioned, we had them kind of crawl under trees. But then with Victoria disappearing, there are no effects there. It's like all in camera. We're pretending that we're following her, and we kind of like roll out of the way. Yeah, and but then of course there's a lot to do with the ghosts, and we added a lot of smoke, and Mike Barnett, who did visual effects, just did a really great job. Like I was always, I think, getting very technical, I think that you can, when you're adding visual effects to something that's digital, that's shot digitally, it kind of like can look really obvious. Like if you're adding smoke, because we did have smoke on location, but I wanted to add more, like it was coming off of the ghosts. And then obviously their eyes are red and their faces are melting. But I think that, like others have mentioned, the film it's a psychological thriller. So I think that a little goes a long way, effects wise, and especially for filmmakers on a smaller budget. And it's just more fun to do stuff practically and in camera, rather than, making all the monsters.
Yeah, no, practical is always better, if you ask me, because especially for short films, because I've seen short films where I watch a lot of short films because I do something called Saturday Night Sci-Fi. So every quarter we do a live viewing where we curate a list of short films, and yours will be added if I can get it. Where we do like different genres, and the ones that always get the best reactions from our tweeters are the ones that use like almost strictly practical effects. Like very few of them have like a lot of VFX, and I think that's because like it helps us to buy into the reality of it, and it helps us. It's more, makes things more believable. Like as I said, I completely bought into this whole like McCoy Field thing, and and I think that's a credit to you and to your team, because like you like as you said, like a little goes a long way, and it does really work with this film, and it doesn't feel like it's something unbelievable in the universe that you've created, right? It doesn't feel like like told him how to do this. It feels like completely believable. So like Kudos
you.
to the team.
Great.
It was fun
Yeah, I
to
mean-
watch on set too. I will
Yeah.
admit, like, to watch like the team kind of get into these like conversations of like how we're gonna
Yeah.
pull the door, how we're gonna do this, we're gonna do how did that look, and like watching it on screen and being like, it was just so fun to. I'm like, you guys are just so dexterous. Like, wow.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah,
the first time we walked up the hill and saw the house wrapped with all the poles and stuff. I was like, wow,
Right?
that's beautiful. That's just
Yeah.
beautiful.
Could almost be like Christmas, almost. But spooky.
Exactly.
I love I wanted to keep it up forever. I will say though, for the McCoy Field, that was definitely like a really so pleased. That was a huge union between like what we did on set, you know, with Victoria's hand, like those sorts of moments, because
Yeah.
you know, the field, you see it ripple a little bit, and sound design wise, you know, it has sort of a ripple, almost like sticky sound that is married to it. And then the tubes have their own sound. It's sort of like a buzzing, but it's also sort of like water. We spent a lot of time designing the sound that they make. These sorts of things that you aren't like noticing them all, and it would be hard to watch a movie if you were like, oh, and that, I'm hearing that and I'm seeing that.
Right.
But then also with score, you know, the sound that we have for the tubes is actually like tuned to the score at moments. All of those were kind of interacting together, which I just think is so fun.
Yeah. To me, the McCoy Field has texture because it looks. The way I saw it is like you talked about the song, but I to me almost like has a visual texture where it felt like if she put her hand through it, felt like it. To me, it seemed like it would be sticky. Like she would actually have to like pull her hand away, and she like could actually feel it. That's what I was thinking when I saw. I'm like, this thing looks like it has like substance to it, like it has like density. So I thought that was interesting, and I was wondering, would animals disappear too, or is it just them?
That is something well, they do, because you see the toad jump into it and disappear.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that that gets a little tricky, right? Like, would all the critters like? But yeah, I think it's like anything that's, in my mind, it was like anything that's moving, that's alive, that's moving like relatively fast.
Yeah, so anything that's organic and has like a basically electrical, which means the ghosts can't get through because they don't have mass.
No, they don't.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So I'm getting a bit technical there.
I love it, Carolyn.
Yeah.
I tell you, when I watch things, like people always like, you read so much into Bill. I'm like, this is how I am.
This is film criticism.
Right.
I'm
Watching McCoy Field be like a new. We're gonna have McCoy Field truthers out there that are like, I'm gonna prove that this exists.
I'm positive someone would probably be like, I can possibly prove it. Because like, in school, didn't we, like, you remember we used to do the things with the potato, do electricity with the potatoes and salt water and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like someone would probably try it. You know, people are always out here making things. They just be like, you know, you should leave things alone. Making robotic dogs, stop. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much, all of you, for speaking with me. I really enjoyed the film, as you can tell, and I really enjoy like everything that you and the team have put into it. Can you just tell us where people will be able to see it after it leaves the festival? Are you going to another one?
Yes, we are going to another festival very soon. And it will be available. So it'll be available virtually. It will be at Black Star. They haven't. I'm not sure when this is airing, but they haven't like officially announced. But yes, so that's where it will be playing next. And hoping to have it be available online like more widely soon after we finish the festival.
Yeah. Are you looking at TIFF?
I don't think so.
Submissions have possibly closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm covering TIFF, so I'm like, that would have been fun to cover.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, and more to come. I think in terms of keeping people up to date, I've been like sharing through Instagram, but hoping to get a more permanent place to keep updates from the film going forward.
All right.
That's good.
So yeah, so Shelly will be telling me where like we can find it afterwards. But for all of you, could you just tell everyone where they can find you on social media and find your work and any upcoming projects that you have that you would like that you can announce, if just in case you can't.
DeLelon Dallas. My Instagram handle is DeLelon D Dallas, and upcoming projects. Actually, I'll be making a premiere in the upcoming season of Power Book 3, Raising Canaan. Yeah. So catch me in those last 4 episodes. You know, yeah. Absolutely.
And Ron?
July 18th. Sorry.
Go ahead, Victoria.
My Instagram is Victoire Villier, Victoire spelled the French way, Villier, Villee. And then I am self-publishing like an art book zine on Black hair texture and protective styling and how it's also architecture and the way it takes up space. So I'm self-publishing. I didn't get any grants, but whatever. I've been saving for it. So I'll let people know when you can purchase it. And it's like archival collage work that I've done. So yeah.
Come on, let's go.
Come on.
And you're going to grad school.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah, I'm going.
Yo, congrats! That's what's up. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm going to grad school in September. Yeah.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Ron, are you on social media?
No, I'm not, actually. Still not. But it's the wonderful world of possibilities out there. So, I'm just getting back into it, and I've been working with a group during the whole pandemic. We were doing cold readings every Tuesday, Naked Angels. Working with a filmmaker, I did a film called Black Magic for white boys. And we're looking at doing some other project this fall. So, wonderful world of possibilities out there.
Ron is the best.
Yeah, Ron.
I'm just so happy that we found you. You're amazing. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yep. And for you, Annalisa.
So people can find me on Instagram at Annie, like ANNIE JLo. I'm supporting this film through its festival run and directing a short film that we're going to shoot next in August with Mary Glenn, who is Nora's friend in the film for a brief moment. Also sci-fi zombie apocalypse film, and also developing a feature which is not necessarily an extension of Inheritance, but deals with similar topics, but it's more of a it's a utopia cult film that perhaps would take place much further into the future, where they've sort of created this like ideal society, and much less about the deleterious effects of racism over the centuries, and more like, what do we do now that we have created this society?
Will the McCoy Field be making an appearance?
I feel like this conversation has really set that fire again. So hopefully, no, I'm not done. I'm not done creating fake science.
You never know. It could play a part in their thing. Like they're walking through. They're like, you have, if it's like a cultist, as you said, like to pass the test, you got to walk through the McCoy Field.
True.
Right of passage.
Right of passage.
The McCoy Field only lets Black people through. And you're like, I'm so sorry. That's so weird. We thought the McCoy Field accepted everybody.
You gotta. Like we've been saying recently on Twitter, maybe Black people need to start gatekeeping things too. That's like, this is our gatekeep. You can't get through. Well, sucks to be true.
Then where would Sean King go?
Well, let's not even talk about it.
I just wanted to, make a joke.
He not getting through. He not getting through.
It's very inappropriate. I'm sorry.
He gets bounced back. Listen. Turn out. I'm getting shady. Anyway, this was so much fun then. Thank you guys so much for talking with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for having
This was
us.
amazing.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.